So this is the Dodgers division, most likely, barring injuries or a really slow start. Remember, we saw a couple years ago, the Rockies took the Dodgers down to, did they have to go to a playoff or like the last weekend to decide the division? So can the Padres do that? Or is there value in the Padres? Zerillo, what do you see in this division?
So we talked about the secret humidors last week, and I've been trying to speculate where those humidors might end up, which teams it's most advantageous for. I think there's a chance that two of them are in LA. I think there's one at Dodger Stadium, and I think there's one in Anaheim.
Why are you thinking this? Have you been reading?
How do you beat the Dodgers other than out homering them? If the Dodgers want to make themselves better, the only way, other than obviously, so they played at 116 win pace last year. They're adding David Price. They're adding Trevor Bauer. Still top 5 defense, offense, pitching. The only way this team loses is when you out-homer them, particularly in the playoffs. I can't.
Wait. So you think that the teams are deciding this on their own without, like, the MLB isn't coming to them, right? Like, it's just so why would the Red Sox decide to do it on that last year then?
Yeah, I have no idea, and it almost seemed like it didn't work because they were still allowing runs at a record pace with that bullpen. So yeah, I don't really know. I'd initially suspected that MLB was the one making the recommendations because they want all parks to play similarly, even though you really can't do that with various size outfield walls. But I was equally confused why they would put it in Citi Field, which was already one of the biggest pitching leaning parks in baseball. So it really doesn't seem to have any logic. If anything, it seems like teams are able to make the recommendation and get it installed. And we talked about the Angels with their fly ball leaning staff. I'm now worried about my unders. Like, are they going to have a 7% fly ball per home run per fly ball rate and win 90 games because of it? Who knows? But the more I've thought about it, like, I don't think it helps any team more than it would help the Dodgers, just because you're not beating this team straight up. You're only going to beat them if you hit 3-run homers. So the fact that they've added more talent, it's the highest win projection I've ever come up with. It's the highest win projection I believe Pacoda's ever come up with. I'm at 104.9. Pacoda's at 104.3. Fangraphs and Davenport are both at 98, 99. So those two systems see the race between the Dodgers and the Padres as more on level terms. Me and Pacoda see about an 8 or 9 win difference between the two teams. So I'm already on the Dodgers over 101.5. I think it's actionable only up to that number, though. And I might even consider, if this number floats up to 105, 106 before opening day, playing the middle back the other way, just because I believe the past 5 teams with a listed win total over 100 have all gone under. 8 of the past 10, something like that. It's a pretty strong trend of teams failing to hit that number because it's a pretty ridiculous pace to try to keep. But I think this Dodgers team is an exception. And I'm willing to pair them with either the Padres or the Giants. The Padres are pretty much between 98 to 95 wins in the market. You can bet them over 93.5 or 94.5. The Giants, if you throw out Davenport, everybody has them at about 77 wins. You can bet them over 74.5. So take one of those two teams. If you don't want to play the Dodgers, take both of those two teams, bet the over. Because I think the talent in this division, the overall talent across the market is 82.3 wins. In the NL East, it's 82.4 wins. The 4 best teams in this division are pretty comparable on average to the 4 best teams in the NL East. Just obviously there's more of a middle ground in the NL East with the competitiveness, but I think these teams are just going to absolutely destroy the Rockies. They're going to beat up on the bad teams in the NL Central. And I wouldn't be surprised if 4 teams manage to exceed their win total. I just don't think you could bet on that. So choose between the Padres or the Giants, but I really like all 4 of the teams that I mentioned at the top of the division talent-wise.
Well, the interesting thing is if you bet the Dodgers and the Padres over, if the Padres go over, in a way it could help the Dodgers go over. And what I mean by that is, like, if they're pushing the Dodgers, like, mathematically they're still alive for the division or the top seed until the end. So it's kind of a hedge. And you also could just easily win both as well. But the only concern with the Dodgers would be is if the Padres are way behind, and then, at the end, they just, they kind of just get into a lull. They don't really push their pitchers as much, blah, blah, blah. But the analytics is such a brilliant point. And we don't need to get into the Kevin Cash decision because we're all going to, because everyone that'll listen to us will disagree with us. But the Dodgers would have, I mean, think about how many World Series they almost had. And like the narrative around like Clayton Kershaw can't win the World Series, can't pitch in the postseason. Like, how many times is that because they left Clayton Kershaw for one inning too long? That's basically why the Dodgers didn't win a World Series. And then, ironically enough, people are yelling about this decision, but that's what the Dodgers did all this postseason, right? They never left their pitchers in. But 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the Dodgers weren't making the same decisions that they are today.
And that's what's so scary about this Dodgers team. Like, Julio Urias and Dustin May are battling for the number 5 position in their rotation. Ross Stripling isn't even going to crack the rotation. They have so many arms that, like I mentioned with the Rays, they could just say, okay, you're going to turn over this lineup once for the next 3 innings after the starter comes out, and it's going to be an elite pitcher coming into the game. It's almost unfair how many arms they have. Not to mention the Dodgers and the Padres both have top 10 farm systems in baseball, have prospects that they continue to bring up or trade for other pieces. So these teams are loaded top to bottom.
It's great. I mean, Ross Stripling just got traded to the Jays, but
yes.
Look, they had Ryu, who's now like an ace on the staff, Maeda, who's like close to an ace on the staff. I mean, the arms on this, they just were like, we don't need them.
And they don't need to push any of their starters 200 innings either. They haven't had a starter go 200 innings in several years. Like, it keeps them well intact for the playoffs. They don't have to push anybody too hard.
Yeah. Colin, your thoughts on the NL West?
Yeah, I mean, living in Oklahoma, the AA and the AAA teams for the Dodgers are here within the state. So seeing guys like Dustin May, Mitch White, Andre Jackson, Josiah Gray, these are the top pitching prospects that are routinely coming through town, and it's just they should not be here. They should be at the major league level. I know that our little research project was go back and look and see teams that were listed in the win total market in triple digits and come back with, how many times that they've actually gone over. Well, per Sports Odds Archive, there were 5 teams that had win totals over 100, and none of them went over their posted win total. So, and we can argue about what book that was taken from, but I mean, it's just you can add other qualifiers to that, because I actually went back and researched like teams that are over 95 wins, and it still comes out to around a 85% under rate for having win totals this high. Blindly, you just look at this number and you should play an under. I agree with Zerillo though. Nobody's really thinking about baseball except people like us at this point, or people that cover it every day of the year. And I think once the general public gets done with March Madness, Sweet 16, and Elite 8, and they start getting into baseball, around the last week of March, I could see this win total for the Dodgers just going up. I see that minus 300 for the division going up.
But
so
here's a question I have for you guys, because we talked about more overs on this podcast and more unders on the American League podcast. 3 of the 4 projection systems have the NL not only better than the AL, but close to 20 to 30 wins better than the AL. Do you think that the difference in the leagues is that severe? Are you higher on more teams in the NL than you are in the American League?
I'm definitely higher on the AL Central than I am the NL Central. I'll tell you that. I mean, that the AL Central is, to me, there are teams like, the Pirates and the Royals. They're not equal, right? The White Sox versus the Reds. There's no correlation to me this year. So from a Central standpoint, I like the AL better.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, but overall, yes, clearly, I think the NL is significantly better. And I'm trying to think of the unders that I'm looking at in the NL. It was the Rockies, and then it was trying to figure out in the NL Central, like who's going to sell and who's not, which is kind of throwing me for a loop. But that's pretty much it. Like I'm just looking at the Rockies win total under is the one that I know that I'm going to invest in, and that's pretty much it.